Hello, everyone. Welcome to CSA Conversations, this time with John Kell. How are you, John?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today from San Francisco.
It's a real pleasure.
Thank you. For me as well, the same pleasure. And you have been called as Mr. Creativity and serial innovator by The Economist. You have unique perspectives with your experience. You have been a Harvard Business School professor, a CEO, a psychiatrist, a jazz pianist, an author, and a Tony-nominated producer of film and stage. Can we just call you a versatilist, a polymath, or a universal man?
Well, all of those sound like they're good descriptions. I guess for me, I would call myself insatiably curious about how creativity and innovation work and how they create value for companies and for leaders and for society as a whole.
That's a great way of describing yourself. And it's so great speaking to you today. We'll have a 20 minutes conversation. There are lots to talk. I'm not sure if our time will be sufficient because you have so much to tell. And I want to start actually with the present time, especially when there is constant disruption nowadays. The disruption is called the pandemic, COVID-19, but there was always disruption in the world in different ways. You always say that as leaders, as people, we need to adopt a new way of, a new model of thinking, especially with a true sense of curiosity, a completely different problem-solving approach, especially with different types of intelligences. And you shared your perspective at Davos as well, in World Economic Forum meetings. And you actually explain your 6 intelligences framework. Can you also take us through this interesting framework and how does it guide us to apply several perspectives, several consistent practices to make a transition from crisis to opportunity in life?
Well, thank you for that question. Let me first say that it's very common these days, I would say almost fashionable to refer to the times as disrupted. But I prefer to describe the situation that we all find ourselves in as one of discontinuity. And I think that distinction is very important. So let me take a moment to explain what I mean. Disruption is like being out on the ocean when the storm hits and the waves get big, and then you have to be a very skillful sailor to stay afloat. And then ultimately the waves calm down and things return to some sense of normal. But I think the times are more like what the sailors from the great age of exploration in the 17th century were facing when they went out to sea to find India or to find treasure, to find pepper, to find gold. The maps they had ended in the middle of the ocean, and beyond the known world, there was the legend, beyond here lie monsters. And I think that while monsters may be too colorful a word for our given times, although that's debatable, I think what faces leaders these days is that the maps we have end before we've reached our desired goal. So our job is not to calm things down. Our job is really much more to reinvent, to reimagine, to redesign, and then to put the managerial skills of reorganizing to work to get to our desired destination. And this forced me at the beginning of the pandemic about a year ago to really think deeply about what leadership really has to be in the 21st century in order to navigate towards these desirable outcomes, but over an unknown territory. And that's why I developed this framework of the 6 intelligences, because I really wanted to step back with a blank piece of paper and say, what do people really, really need to know? You know, so many of our ideas about leadership come from an industrial model of analysis and hierarchy and control and intuition and creativity and inspiration and values and human emotions have traditionally been put in the back seat. But now we see that the balance is shifting, and that purpose and the social responsibilities of business and the leader as someone who deeply understands human beings and can be the spokesperson for culture and for transformation, and can, in a sense, be an instigator of new things, becomes more important than ever. So the 6 intelligences start off with what I call context intelligence. In other words, understanding the truth of your current situation. And it sounds easy to say, but it's very hard to put into practice. It's what people in the military call situational awareness. You know, when you are dropped into an unfamiliar environment, can you quickly understand it and maybe faster than your competitors so that you have an advantage? And so much of our perception of reality is grounded in our prejudices and our way of looking at things, what psychologists call our confirmation biases. So simply having ways to get at the truth of our current situation is a fundamental skill, because if we don't know where we are, we can't know how to get to where we want to go. And context has a great deal to do not just with psychological skills, but also with organizational skills. You know, how does an organization build knowledge to sense its environment and to be able to tap into divergent sources of perspective that might not even be comfortable to listen to, but are very important for creating a full picture. Then I talk about moral intelligence, not in the sense of theology, but in the sense of purpose, because purpose and what you value is what shapes your destination, what your ultimate goals are. And if you don't have a vision for what you want to accomplish, that's motivated by values, that's shaped and colored by values, you don't have very much. And of course, these days also, we have to think about the social aspect of business, that the social responsibility of business. The Business Roundtable recently said that the purpose of companies has to be a lot more than simply increasing shareholder value. It has to be about increasing social value as well. Then the third intelligence is what I call human intelligence. So this is basically social and emotional intelligence, the intelligence of communicating with effect and being able to diagnose and understand human behavior, not just to control it or shape it, but to actually empathize with it. Because when the desires of people are aligned with the desires of an organization, that's when you get real power. I talk about generative intelligence, which is really talking about how do you generate what is new and valuable? How do you develop it? How do you do it at an individual psychological level, but also at an organizational level? And so many companies, organizations are still dealing with an old-fashioned playbook for innovation. You know, it's product development literature or the product development funnel or some kind of very industrial process. And that's not necessarily how innovation works. I mean, I live in San Francisco, which has traditionally been the innovation capital, so to speak, with Silicon Valley and so forth and so on. And this is not the industrial model. This is about people, and it's about different kinds of networks and processes and leadership skills. So generative intelligence. And then related to that is technological intelligence. I find that a lot of leaders are actually not that sophisticated about technology. They delegate it to somebody else. But the onslaught of new technologies, what the World Economic Forum refers to as the fourth industrial revolution, really requires a literacy. It's almost like speaking a language. And it's not just AI changes everything, but it's life sciences and material science and many streams of technological advance coming together, which you really need to understand. And then finally, there's transformational intelligence, which is how you weave together the narratives of creativity and innovation and change management into a coherent game plan, a theory of change, if you will, for orchestrating transformation. That really ultimately is the role of a leader. Leaders are not these days about being the safekeepers of what exists. Leaders are about helping organizations to evolve into the future. So I've not only spent time thinking about this framework, but thinking deeply about what the deficiencies in leadership development are. Because, of course, there's a limit to what you can do in a keynote speech or a half-day workshop or something like that. And my background is teaching MBAs and executives in a business school where the learning occurs over a lengthy period of time. So much of what I feel is most exciting about the six intelligences is that it's now a teachable, learnable system for senior people to quickly acquire these proficiencies so they can be effective in this environment.
I think you're the ideal person for that, because you're on the practitioner side as well as on the more theoretician side as well. You know, you're an academician as well as you, as I know, you are the co-founder of so many high-tech companies as well in the US. So you know about the technology side, you know about the leadership side, psychology side, creativity side. So altogether, make a lot of sense to make a module to teach the leaders.
Well, as I said at the beginning, a lot of how I look at myself is as an innately curious person. So if you look at my nonlinear career, there's actually a logic to it, because every, let's say, every episode in my career was an opportunity for me to learn something, you know, whether it be learning the Harvard Business School model or the corporate model or the Silicon Valley model or the Hollywood model or the Broadway model. And then digesting it and saying, well, what's above all of this that I can distill for the benefit of people who, you know, the thing I enjoy the most is working with people who are in the hot seat for delivering on some kind of an innovation or transformation agenda, and helping them take that journey so that they can be successful.
Yeah, they call it the eclectic experience. Am I wrong? Or basically the eclectic experience, and you combine it with also the artistic side of it.
Well, it's
with
true.
Art and music, yeah.
Yes, my first career interest when I was actually quite young was to be a performing musician, a professional musician, which I didn't give up fully until I was about 18. And even today, sometimes, you know, Yamaha made me their first innovation artist, because I sometimes use music to illustrate the principles of creativity and innovation on stage. You know, there's a real difference between playing music with the notes, like the composer wanted you to do, and then improvising something where you're creating the notes in the moment, right? And then, and I wrote a book actually over 20 years ago about what leaders can learn from jazz musicians. So, you know, these days, I think you need to have a perspective that pulls many different threads together. You can't just be doing one thing. And so that's, in a way, I mean, I'm biased because I'm obviously eclectic and not focused on one discipline. I mean, I think focus is good, and I think people who are specialized are invaluable. But I think these days, being able to pull different things together and integrate them is the key to success.
Yeah, and then they can foster each other. They can nurture each other as well. Each area, probably. Music nurtures business. Business nurtures another thing. And psychology is very much central to the topic. You are a psychiatrist at the same time. That makes you, you know, perfectly, I think, suitable for teaching about psychology of people, psychology of the creativity. I
never really planned to be a traditional doctor or medical academic. I studied medicine and studied psychiatry early in my career because I wanted that knowledge. And in a way, my whole orientation is to the human experience, you know, I think a lot of management theory and management education kind of looks at the human being like a black box. You know, it's like these black boxes run around and they do things, and then you count their behaviors. But it's not really about going inside the human experience. And that always seemed to me to be a very high priority, which is probably why I was invited to be a professor at Harvard Business School for that period of time.
I understand. And I was reading your column in Forbes, and there was a recent article you were mentioning about the description of depression and anxiety over there. Depression happens, you know, about things when you look back and you worry about things, but the anxiety when you look ahead. Then in this case, the best way is to, you know, to stay in the present moment, probably to dwell on the present moment instead of worrying about missed opportunities, perceived failures, about life and business. But isn't it difficult to stay in the present moment. Although mindfulness is very popular nowadays in the business and in individual lives.
Right. Well, this speaks to another gap in management and leadership learning, which is a gap in effort spent at self-cultivation. You go to the gym to make sure that your body still functions, but most leaders, in my experience, don't necessarily have a discipline or a regimen for cultivating their mental wellness and their mental faculties. And what we're talking about in terms of mindfulness actually is related to many traditions of meditation and prayer and self-cultivation, where the bottom line for it is being able to be in the present. Because if you're in the present, there is no past, there is no future. There's only that current moment, which allows you then to see things clearly. If you're worried about what happened before, there's an infinite opportunity for regret and for sadness or for the sense of missed opportunity. And if you spend all your time thinking about the future, you're going to worry about whether you're going to accomplish the future that you have in your mind. But if you're in the present, you're simply doing the things that you're doing. And it sounds maybe a little bit abstract if you have not had the experience of meditation or any kind of mindfulness practice, but it's a very necessary part of self-cultivation. It's what also happens in psychotherapy.
That's true. We almost came to the final part of the conversation. Do you have final messages to the audience?
Well, as I said earlier, my greatest pleasure is working with audiences that are in the hot seat for delivering on some kind of a creative, innovative, transformational agenda. And these days, leaders have lonely jobs because it's very difficult to put together a coherent picture of what needs to be done. And the old playbooks don't necessarily work that well to guide them through to the place they want to get to. So I've spent my whole career developing practical, actionable methods for leaders, and leaders at all levels, not just the CEO, but I consider everyone who's working to progress an organization a leader. I've developed these kind of how you do it approaches that are very practical, and experience has shown are valued by people. So I look forward to the opportunity to share this with the great audiences out there.
Look forward to listening to your webinars and hopefully face-to-face conversations as well in the future.
Maybe I'll play some piano.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much again for your time, John, and have a safe time and stay safe and healthy.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Thank you.